Good evening, you tired human with a busy brain and a body that insists it's fine. The day has been loud and bright and full of tiny requests that cling to you like grit in your socks. So let's do something softer. Let's step into a place where the world moves with steady hands and quiet purpose, where even the sea seems to lower its voice for you. You stand, in the mind's gentle lantern light, at the Phoenician docks of Tyre. Dawn begins to unroll across the water, turning the harbor into pewter and pale gold. Stone quays hold the shoreline like calm shoulders. Ropes hum with sleepy tension. Hulls creak the way old houses do at night. Nothing urgent, just life settling into its joints. And somewhere in the middle of all that salt air, you catch a faint, impossible hint of purple, as if the morning has decided to blush. Here's the reality check. You probably won't survive this story awake. Not because it's scary, but because Tyre is good at slowing you down until your eyelids start negotiating their own peace treaty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. The darkness in your room becomes the darkness before sunrise. The air tastes of brine instead of dust. A cool breeze slides along your skin, carrying wet wood and tar and the faint, clean bite of resin. Beneath your feet, dock planks are worn into shallow grooves, polished by years of footsteps and work. Ahead, the harbor opens wide and quiet. Boats rest close together, their sides painted in earthy tones that drink in the dim light. Sails are furled and tied down, not for drama but for discipline. Tyre sits behind the docks with patient confidence, pale stone rising in soft angles, windows still dark, as if the city is sleeping while the waterfront stays awake. You move forward, and you realize how calm labor can look when it isn't performed for anyone. Shapes pass in the half-light. Dock hands, carriers, merchants, each wrapped in routine. A rope is checked, tightened, checked again. A crate is nudged into alignment. A small oil lamp swings from a post, and its flame makes slow circles on the planks. The sounds are gentle, soft scuffs of feet, muted clinks of pottery, a quiet slap of water against wood. Somewhere nearby, calm trade banter flows in a low stream. Not sharp bargaining, not theatrical haggling. More like practiced courtesy. Small hums of agreement, quiet corrections, the subtle rhythm of counting. You don't need the words. The tone tells you enough. This is commerce treated like craft. Tyre offers you details one at a time. Coiled ropes lie in tidy spirals, smelling of seawater. Sealed jars and amphory stand ready for journeys you can't yet imagine. Bundles of cloth are stacked under covers to keep the damp air from stealing their softness. And then, Almost without warning, you notice what the whole port is quietly orbiting. The color arrives as a whisper, a dyed thread looped around a tag, a faint stain on a thumb, a scrap of cloth tucked inside a chest, only briefly exposed and then hidden again, protective, almost tender. The purple does not announce itself because it doesn't have to. It already knows its value. The first time you truly see it, it catches the newborn light on the edge of a folded textile. In the dim, it looks nearly black, heavy as night. Then the sun touches it, and the hue opens, deep, saturated, alive. It feels like evening pressed into fabric, like a secret made durable. Your attention slows on instinct, as if your mind wants to match the patience it must take to coax such a color into existence. You can almost sense the journey hiding inside that thread. Sea and salt and time, careful hands and watchful eyes, decisions made quietly rather than shouted. Nothing about it feels rushed. Even the desire for it begins here as restraint. Water beside the quay is dark and calm, disturbed only by small ripples. Beyond the harbor mouth, a thin band of light sits on the horizon, and day arrives without pushing. You pause near a stack of crates and inhale. The wood smells clean and sharp, cedar maybe, cut and sealed and ready to travel. The scent clears your head, and you notice how tired you were before you arrived. Not broken, just overloaded. Tyre doesn't fix that by entertaining you. Tyre fixes it by being itself. A place where work is steady, voices are low, and even the most coveted color in the world begins as a careful whisper on a quiet dock. You let your breath lengthen. Somewhere, a lamp is pinched out as sunlight takes over. Somewhere, a sealed chest is lifted with two hands, as if it contains not just cloth but a promise. And as the first proper light slides across stone and wood, you feel very gently that you've stepped into the beginning of a calm current, one that will carry you deeper into salt air, soft commerce, and the slow, impossible bloom of purple. You stay where you are, letting the new light spread across the harbor until everything looks freshly rinsed. The sea keeps breathing in small, regular motions, and the docks answer with their own quiet pulse. Even the birds seem trained by habit. Gulls circle, dip, and rise again, not as chaos but as a pattern your tired brain can follow without effort. As your eyes adjust, you notice the port's tempo the way you notice your own heartbeat when the room goes dark, subtle at first, then unmistakable. A rope slides through a calloused hand and hums against a wooden post. A knot is tightened, then checked with the calm suspicion of someone who has been betrayed by rope before. Footsteps move in worn lanes on the planks. One side for carrying, one side for passing, an invisible map that keeps bodies from colliding as the day wakes up. Cargo arrives in a soft parade. Amphories stand like patient figures waiting their turn. Crates of timber, bundles of reeds, sacks that smell of grain and dusted sunlight. Each item is handled with practical respect. Not reverence, not theater. Just the understanding that everything here has traveled and will travel again, and the harbor is the only safe pause between distances. You watch hands do what hands do best when they've learned a craft. Lift, shift, steady, lower. Movements are measured so loads don't slam, jars don't crack, and backs don't twist. The work has a gentle cadence, like a song you don't realize you know until you hear it and your breathing starts to match. Near you, the low current of trade talk continues, but it never breaks the calm surface. It lives in murmurs and nods, in the small pause before a bundle is accepted, in the tiny tilt of a head that means, yes, that will do. The docks don't need loud voices to be certain. They have routines for certainty, and everyone leans on them the way you lean on a pillow when you finally stop pretending you can stay awake. You drift along the quay and notice how greetings happen without spectacle. A touch to the chest, a dip of the head, the shared look that says the sea brought you and we will handle what the sea delivered. Commerce here is an everyday language, spoken fluently and quietly. The morning strengthens, and the harbor shows you its choreography. One set of workers minds the lines that keep ships snug against stone. Another receives goods onto the quay, forming tidy islands of cargo. Others move those islands inland toward shade so heat can't warp wood or sour oil. The flow is circular, water to dock, dock to cover, cover to market, market to ship again. Follow it long enough and your thoughts begin to slow to match. Smells arrive in layers, tar and wet rope, resin, cedar, brine, and you realize how many journeys are compressed into scent. Tyre doesn't demand you memorize routes or names. It lets the world pass near you until you understand, in your body, that this harbor is a hinge between far shores. You start noticing the small tools that keep the calm intact. Smooth stones used as weights, twine wrapped around stoppers, wax pressed with private marks, scales held level with an almost meditative patience. When someone doubts a measure, the correction is quiet and physical. A finger pointing, a weight replaced, the beam settling to center. You learn the harbor's rules without anyone announcing them. Don't stand in the path of a load. Don't brush past stacked jars. Don't touch a seal unless you mean to own the consequence. These laws live in movement, and you absorb them the way you absorb a lullaby, by being surrounded by it until your muscles cooperate. And then, every so often, you catch that deep purple again, and it acts like a bell you can't hear but somehow feel. A folded cloth is turned, the color flashes, then it's tucked back under cover. A fingertip carries a faint stain, as if the dye has claimed a small tribute. The purple is present without dominating, like the promise of sleep in the background while you insist you're still listening. The harbor's steadiness does something kind to you. It makes you aware of how much of your world uses noise to feel important. Here, importance comes from continuity. The rope that holds, the measure that stays honest, the ship that departs when the wind allows. Tyre isn't trying to impress you. It's trying to function, and in that simple competence you find relief. You pause at the edge and look down. Dark green near the stone, lighter where the sun reaches it. The water carries broken reflections, shards of sky that drift and reform. A hull nudges gently against the quay, and the sound is a quiet knock on a door you're already opening. With almost amused tenderness, you feel the earlier warning about not surviving this story awake turning truer by the minute. Not because you're bored, but because the harbor is coaxing you into a slower clock. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw unclenches, the world becomes manageable. Lift, steady, set down. Tie, check, retie, count, nod, move on. And as Tyre's morning work continues, unhurried, practiced, and strangely kind, you let yourself be carried by its rhythm a little farther along the dockside, toward whatever the city is ready to show you next. You keep drifting along the quay, and the harbor begins to notice you in the quiet way a well-run place notices anything slightly out of place. Not with alarm, but with a quick assessment and a gentle correction. A couple of dock hands angle their bodies so you naturally step into a safer lane. A shoulder turns, a palm lifts, and you understand without words where your feet should go. Tyre teaches by motion, and it assumes you can learn. Up close, the dock hands are not heroic statues of labor. Just people with sun-browned forearms and the steady patience that comes from doing essential things every day and still respecting them. Their clothing is practical. Their movements are economical. They simply keep the harbor from unraveling. Rope is the first language they offer you, because rope is the harbor's nervous system. Coils lie stacked like sleeping snakes, but nothing about them is sleepy once they're in use. A line goes taut and sings a low note as a ship shifts its weight. Fibers tighten, bite, and hold. The dock hands read those changes with calm accuracy. Tension here, slack there, a small adjustment before a small problem becomes a big, wet one. You watch them handle lines with respectful caution. Hands slide along the fibers, testing for fray, feeling for grit and salt. When they pay out a line, they do it steadily, letting it move as if it prefers guidance over force. When they take in slack, they do it with controlled strength, keeping the coil clean so it will be ready again. Near a post at the edge, a thick line is wrapped and locked with a knot that looks almost like sculpture. Loops laid with intention, crossings set with confidence. You can tell this knot has been tied 1,000 times, but never carelessly. Fingers move quickly, yet nothing about the movement feels rushed. The knot settles, tidy and secure, and something in your chest settles with it. You mirror the rhythm in your breathing. In, out, wrap, pull, check, release. Your thoughts slow another notch. That earlier, you probably won't survive this awake warning isn't a threat. It's a kindness. The harbor keeps offering predictable patterns until your nervous system remembers how to rest. They guide you, again without speech, toward a small task, visitor-sized but still important. A loose coil sits in a path where it could trip someone carrying a jar. A dockhand lifts it, sets it closer to a post, then gestures for you to notice the difference. Danger moved into order. You step closer and take in the rope's honest heaviness, the faint dampness, the salt crust texture where the sea has kissed it too many times to count. When you lift, you feel the rope pull back with its stubborn weight. It isn't friendly, but it isn't hostile. It is simply what it is, fibers twisted into reliability. You place it where it belongs, and you feel the tiny hum of participation, the quiet satisfaction of helping the system stay calm. They lead you onward into the space where ships meet stone. Hulls nudge, timbers flex, water lifts and drops in slow measures. A line creaks as it absorbs a vessel's gentle insistence on drifting. A dockhand braces, leans, and makes a micro-adjustment. A half step, a small pull, that keeps the ship snug without grinding it into the quay. It is care disguised as routine. As you follow their work, you see how the harbor's calm is made. It isn't the absence of effort. It's effort arranged so it looks effortless. Every rope is checked before it fails. Every load is balanced before it tips. Every pathway is kept clear so no one has to hurry. Hurry is where mistakes are born, and mistakes here crack pottery, spill oil, or send something precious into the water. Between ropes and posts, you catch small flashes of what Tyre quietly treasures. A sealed jar passed hand to hand without jolting. A crate lowered rather than dropped. And then, again, that purple hint, the faint stain on a thumbnail, the corner of fabric tucked away. Even the dock hands, whose world is mostly brine and wood and strain, carry the secret color as if it has brushed their lives and left a soft mark. You pause and place your hand on the post, feeling a line's vibration under tension. The sensation travels up through your bones, a low, steady reassurance. The sea can change, the wind can shift, but a well-tied knot holds its promise. The dock hands live in that promise, repeating it, renewing it, anchoring it to stone. By the time the sun climbs a little higher, you realize you've been guided all along, away from danger, into rhythm, toward competence. You are still a visitor, still gently out of place, but you are less of a disturbance now. Your steps follow the lanes. Your hands respect the rope. Your breathing matches the harbor's pace. And as you move with them, deeper into the waking port, you feel Tyre's gift settling over you like a light blanket. The quiet knowledge that order can be kind, and that a simple rope, treated properly, can hold an entire world in place. You follow the harbor's calm inward, away from the edge where water keeps whispering against stone, and into the part of Tyre that feels like the city's slow exhale. The docks are still close enough that you can hear the occasional creak of a hull and the low hum of rope under tension, but the sounds soften as walls begin to rise around you. Simple, sturdy structures built for one purpose, holding the world still for a moment. The warehouses sit just behind the quay like patient guardians. Their doors are wide, their thresholds worn smooth by countless sawls and dragged crates. The air changes as you cross from sunlit planks into shade. Outside, salt and light. Inside, cool darkness and the smell of stored time. It is immediately obvious that Tyre understands moisture the way you understand deadlines. As a quiet force that will ruin everything if you pretend it isn't real. The warehouse interiors are built to breathe without letting damp settle. High openings catch moving air. Thick stone keeps the temperature steady. Floors are swept clean of grit that could grind into jars or snag cloth. Nothing is left on bare earth where moisture and pests can claim it. Crates sit on low wooden slats. Amphorae are nestled in sand or packed tightly so they do not bump and crack when someone inevitably stumbles at the worst moment. And you can feel the overall intention. Reduce surprises. Surprises are for festivals and love letters, not for storage. Your eyes adjust slowly. The light is dim but not dead, filtering through gaps near the roof and falling in pale stripes across stacked goods. You move down a narrow lane between tall piles of timber and rows of amphorae lined like silent soldiers. Each jar bears marks, paint, scratch symbols, small tags tied with twine. You don't read them so much as feel their purpose. Oil, wine, resin, fish sauce, grain, something precious enough to warrant extra sealing. Wax seals gleam faintly where lamplight touches them. Some are plain and practical. Others carry a pressed mark, a signature without ink. The sense of quiet trade banter drifts here too, muted by stone, soft approvals, measured reconsiderations, the gentle music of people agreeing on value without needing to announce their confidence. It's the same calm you've been absorbing since dawn, only now wrapped in cool air and shadow. You pass stacks of folded cloth, protected under coverings that keep dust and damp away. Some are natural and pale, rougher in weave, ready to become sails or sacks. Others are finer, smoother, folded with the careful tenderness you usually reserve for clean laundry you swear you'll put away properly this time. There are bolts of linen, wool, and cloth with patterns you can't fully see in the dim, but you sense their difference by the way they're handled. Lifted rather than grabbed, turned rather than tossed. And then you see it again, purple. Not everywhere. Not displayed like some desperate brag. Just present like a heartbeat. A corner of dyed textile peeks from under a cover for one breath of time. A worker's fingers carry a faint stain, the color lodged in skin like a secret that refuses to wash out. Even in the warehouse's cool hush, the purple seems to hold warmth, as if it remembers the heat of the vats and refuses to become ordinary. You keep walking, letting the warehouse show you its logic. Heavy goods are stored low, easy to roll or drag. Fragile goods sit protected, nestled, never left to chance. You see boxes that hold glass, tires clear, shimmering pride, packed in straw and wedged so it won't rattle. There are metal tools too, hooks, blades, small weights, clamps, not displayed as weapons but as necessities. The city runs on small, solid things. Overhead, thick beams cross the ceiling, dark with age and smoke from lamps. The wood smells faintly of cedar and resin, and you realize this is not just storage. It is preservation. Cedar discourages pests and rot. Resin seals and protects. Everything is chosen with the calm foresight of people who have learned that nature will always try to take things back. A few steps deeper, you come upon a section where the air smells sharply different. Spices and dried herbs, hints of sweetness and heat. Here, sacks are tied tight and labeled carefully, because mistakes in this aisle do not simply cost money. They cost trust. The sacks are stacked so air can move between them, so nothing sweats or molds. A careful hand checks a knot, the same way a dockhand checks a line. The harbor and the warehouse share the same religion. Verify, then verify again. You notice narrow wooden boards suspended between stacks, acting as ramps and bridges so loads can move without jarring. Footsteps are quieter here, and you find yourself stepping more softly, as if the stone itself has asked for gentleness. That's the strange thing about well-designed places. They make you behave better without scolding you. In one corner, a small lamp burns with a steady flame, its glow catching dust motes that drift like slow snow. You watch them float and fall, and your mind does the same. You think of the ropes outside humming under tension, and how those ropes hold ships. Then you think of these walls holding cargo, holding value, holding stories that arrived in the shape of jars and cloth and timber. Tyre does not just trade goods. It trades continuity. It takes chaos from the sea and turns it into order under stone. A quiet problem almost appears. Your foot nudges a loose shard of something brittle on the floor, and for a moment you imagine a jar has cracked somewhere. But it's only a fragment left from some earlier break, swept aside and waiting to be discarded properly. Even the mistakes here are contained. Even the accidents are managed without drama. You pause near a stack of cloth and let your fingers hover above the folds without touching. You remember the dock hand's silent rules. Don't handle what you can't claim. The restraint feels oddly soothing. Not everything is yours to fix. Not everything is yours to carry. Sometimes you are simply meant to witness how other people keep the world running quietly, and let that steadiness teach your body how to relax. When you step back toward the warehouse doors, sunlight spills across the threshold like warm water. The harbor's sounds return, soft and familiar now. The cool hush behind you remains, filled with amphory and timber and the faint, stubborn secret of purple, waiting as patiently as you are learning to wait. You step back into the open air with that cool warehouse hush still clinging to you like a shadow, and the docks immediately feel brighter, saltier, more alive. The lanes on the planks are busier now, but still disciplined. No frantic zigzags, no careless swinging loads. Tyre continues to do what it does best. Make complicated things look calm. Your guides, those steady hands and watchful eyes you've been orbiting since dawn, angle you along the edge of the working harbor and toward a place that the city keeps close but never tries to make pleasant. Not because it's shameful, because it's honest. The secret behind a coveted color is rarely scented like roses. The first hint reaches you before you see it. A sharp, marine tang, part brine, part sun-warmed rock, part something older and stranger. Like the sea has been keeping a private joke and decided to share it with you. Your face does that involuntary little tighten, the one you do when you're trying to be polite to a smell that is not interested in your politeness. Then you see the piles. Mounds of shells sit beyond the main lanes, stacked like pale hills, cream, chalk, and sand tones under the sun, with darker shadows pooled between them. From a distance, they look almost beautiful in a bleak, sculptural way, like dunes made of bone-white spirals. Up close, they become unmistakably what they are. The discarded armor of tiny sea creatures, gathered by the thousands, then tens of thousands, then the kind of number your brain refuses to picture properly because it would rather nap. The shells are mostly small, knobbly, and ridged murex, the source of Tyre's deep purple. You don't need anyone to announce their importance. The entire harbor has been quietly pointing you here with every faint purple thread you've seen, every careful seal, every restrained handling of dyed cloth. This is where the color begins. Not in the warehouse, not on a loom, not on a merchant's scale, but in the sea's smallest hard spiral. You stand at the edge of one shell mountain and let your gaze climb it. The piles are not random. They're organized the way everything in Tyre is organized, by work stage, by access, by what needs to be close to what. Some heaps are fresh and darker with damp. Others are dry and sun-bleached, older, their edges softened by time. In places the shells crunch underfoot like rough gravel, and you understand why the workers keep this area slightly separate from the smoother, cleaner lanes. Your guides move with quiet familiarity, and you follow their lead with the same careful restraint you learned in the warehouses. Don't touch what you don't understand. Don't step where you might slip. Don't pretend your discomfort is the most important thing in the room. You watch the process from the outside, and it unfolds with the same measured patience you've seen all morning. The shells arrive from fishers who work the shallows and rocky edges. They are collected in baskets, sorted, and brought here where the first task is simple and repetitive. Breaking, opening, separating what can be used from what cannot. It is not a glamorous beginning, and Tyre does not waste time trying to disguise it. The workers' hands are quick but not careless. Tools, stones, small hammers, wedges appear and disappear with practiced rhythm. The shells crack and split, and the sound is dry and crisp, like the snapping of twigs. You feel the city's discipline even here. Waste stays contained, tools are kept close, movement stays efficient. And somewhere in that work, the secret reveals itself, not as a dramatic unveiling, but as a chain of small, practical choices that add up to wonder. You learn by watching. The dye is not scooped from the shell like treasure from a chest. It is coaxed from the animal inside, a tiny source, a drop-like beginning that must be gathered in large numbers. The scale of the shell piles suddenly makes sense. One shell is nothing. 1,000 shells is the first hint of something. 10,000 shells is the start of a real batch. The purple you glimpsed in the warehouse, rich and heavy as twilight, demands volume, patience, and a kind of stubborn devotion that borders on obsession. Though Tyre would never call it that. Tyre would call it trade. The smell is stronger here, and you breathe shallowly because you are wise and also because your body has opinions. The scent clings to heat and brine. It isn't violent, it's simply insistent. It tells you, in a language older than words, that the sea is made of living things, and that the most prized luxuries are rarely clean at the source. Nearby, shallow vessels and containers sit in careful arrangement, catching the sunlight. You notice that the workers treat time like an ingredient. They allow mixtures to rest. They keep things shaded or exposed depending on what stage they're in. They move with the calm certainty of people who have learned what happens if you rush a process that does not respect your schedule. You begin to understand the strange transformation at the heart of this craft. The color does not arrive fully formed. It shifts. It changes when it meets air and light. It deepens as if it's remembering what it's supposed to become. There's a quiet magic in that. Not the kind that requires spells, but the kind that requires restraint and attention. The sea offers raw material. The sun and air do part of the work. Human hands do the rest, guiding the change rather than forcing it. And the most hypnotic part is how ordinary everyone looks while doing something extraordinary. No one is posing. No one is performing. There's no dramatic flourish as purple is born. There is only the steady repetition of gathering, preparing, waiting, and knowing. You catch, again, that faint stain on a worker's fingers. More shadow than color at first glance. It looks like bruised dusk, like the edge of night caught under a nail. It's not pretty on skin. It's not meant to be. It's evidence. Proof that the secret has been handled, that the process has moved forward, that Tyre's most famous hue is not a rumor but a substance that can mark you. The calm trade banter from the docks reaches even here, softened by distance. You don't hear sharp deals or heated disputes, only the low certainty of people exchanging value in measured tones. Somewhere, merchants are already thinking beyond the shell piles, beyond the smell, beyond the sun-warmed work. They're thinking of folded cloth, sealed chests, careful routes, and the way a single deep color can make a person feel powerful. You stand quietly with the shell mountains at your side and let the scale of it settle into you. Tyre is not built on grand gestures. It is built on small decisions repeated faithfully. A knot tied properly, a jar sealed correctly, a sack stored off the ground, a shell gathered and used rather than wasted. The purple begins here, among the pale spirals and the stubborn scent, in a place that is not trying to charm you, only to function. And somehow, because everything is so methodical and contained, even this harsh edge of the craft feels calming. The secret is not a secret because it's hidden. It's a secret because it's work, and work looks boring from the outside until you understand what it makes. You breathe again, slower this time, and let your mind drift toward the next step, because you can already sense that the shell mountains are only the beginning, and the real transformation waits where heat, brine, and patience take over. You leave the shell mountains behind, and the air changes as if you've crossed an invisible border between raw sea stuff and human intention. The scent follows you, stubborn as a memory, but it begins to mix with smoke from small fires, warm salt water, and wet cloth drying in the sun. The dye yard sits open to the sky yet tucked behind low walls that hold in heat. Wide vats occupy the space like dark ponds that refuse to ripple. Steam lifts in slow curls, and it moves exactly the way you want your thoughts to move. Unhurried, unbothered, drifting toward rest. The workers here do not treat this as a performance. They treat it like a tide table, something you respect, monitor, and never rush, because the moment you rush, it punishes you by turning ordinary. Tyre has no interest in ordinary, and you, if you're honest, are also exhausted by ordinary. You're guided along a clear lane between stations. Hands gesture where to step and where not to lean. You obey without feeling ordered, because the lane itself is an argument you can't really debate. Your feet fall into the safe path. Your shoulders angle away from swinging fabric. Your breathing deepens, warmed by steam and salt, softened by the steady pace of work. Near the first vats, brine is handled with the same seriousness others reserve for wine. Salt water is poured carefully, not splashed. A wooden paddle stirs a dark surface that looks nearly black in the shade. The motion is slow and consistent, like tracing circles to soothe a restless mind. The surface rolls, settles, rolls again. Froth would mean impatience. The yard is arranged around time. Some vats are active, steam rising steadily. Some are covered and resting, protected from dust and too much sun. Others sit empty but clean, waiting. You sense an inhale and an exhale in the way the place works, heat building, then being allowed to calm, then building again. And yes, the smell has layers. Sea and shell, but also fermentation, stale, sour, oddly alive. It isn't here to please you. It's here to do the slow work that turns what looks like nothing into what people will hoard like a promise. Your face tightens for a second, and you accept the truth. Luxury is frequently born in conditions that would fail a polite person's approval rating. Cloth arrives folded, then opened with care. Some pieces are pale and plain, almost shy. Others are already mid-process, caught between shades. The workers lower the fabric into the vat with controlled deliberation, keeping folds from trapping air. Air makes unevenness. Unevenness makes complaints. Complaints make headaches. And this yard is built to prevent headaches the way the docks prevent collisions. The fabric disappears under the surface. A short while later it is drawn up again, heavy with liquid. At first it looks underwhelming, dull, greenish, bruised, nearly wrong. This is the moment your impatient brain wants to judge and move on. This is the moment your tired body wants to lie down and let history happen without you. But the yard teaches patience by letting you witness change. As the cloth meets air, the color begins to shift, passes through stages as if it's waking up, remembering what it's supposed to be. A muted tone deepens. The sheen changes. Where the fabric catches light, you see darkness settling into the fibers, not painted on but absorbed, taking up residence. The workers hang the cloth on racks so air can reach every inch. Pieces sway slightly in the warm draft, and the sight is hypnotic. Rows of fabric breathing, darkening, becoming. You watch and realize this craft is as much about waiting as it is about stirring. Not the passive waiting of boredom, but the active waiting of attention. Watch, note, adjust, repeat. Hands are often stained. Not dramatically, not like a curse. Just a quiet tint that lingers in skin lines and under nails. The dye does not wash away easily, and in that stubbornness you sense its entire purpose. If it can cling to a thumb through scrubbing, it can cling to cloth through sun, sweat, and sea spray. A small strip is dipped, lifted, and held in the light. You can't hear the decision, but you can see it in the pause and the calm nod. Timing matters. Too short and the color is thin. Too long and the cloth can suffer, the shade can turn wrong. The yard keeps its time the way the harbor keeps its lanes. Quietly, carefully, and without apology. You stand in the steam and let the rhythm work on you. Stir, rest, dip, lift, hang, wait. The whole place feels like a slow heartbeat. Beneath the sour tang and the heat, you catch that deeper promise again. Purple forming not as a flash, but as a gradual settling, as if night itself is being persuaded into fabric one calm breath at a time. Your eyelids grow heavier, yet you stay present because the dye yard is doing something rare. It is showing you, without speeches, how patience becomes value, through brine, warmth, and the steady hands of people who know that the most powerful color in the world is born by refusing to hurry. You step away from the dye yard's warm breath, and the steam thins behind you like a curtain lowering on a slow, salty stage. The sour tang still clings to your sleeves, faint but persistent, because Tyre refuses to let you forget that its most famous luxury begins in brine and patience, not in perfume and applause. Your eyelids feel heavier in the best way. The path draws you back toward the docks, but not into the open lanes of rope and timber. You are guided instead into a shaded pocket where the city keeps something just as valuable as purple. Trust. The air is cooler here, held under beams and stone. The sounds are drier too, only soft taps, tiny clinks, and the whisper of a reed pen moving across a surface. Scales sit on tables like small altars to balance. Their beams are straight and worn smooth, their cords clean, their pans evenly shaped. Nothing about them looks dramatic, yet everything about them looks decisive. A ship can cross the sea on a good hull and a good wind, but it cannot cross commerce without a good measure. A weight is set gently into a pan. The beam tilts, obedient and honest. Another weight follows, smaller, placed with precise fingertips. The beam settles closer to center, wavers once, then steadies. You feel the attention in the room, focused, unhurried. A grain too much, a chip too little, a pan damp with salt air. Tiny errors that grow into suspicion, and suspicion grows into noise. Nearby, scribes sit where the trade actually happens. Their posture is stillness trained into habit. Reed pens glide, pause, glide again. Marks appear. Numbers, symbols, small notations that turn a messy world into orderly lines. You don't need to read them to feel the relief they provide. What enters will be remembered. What leaves will be accountable. Tools for memory surround you. Smooth stones used as weights rounded by touch. Little tags tied with twine. Seals pressed into wax or clay, carrying a mark that cannot be copied without effort. Standard weights kept together, nested like a family, each one a quiet declaration that a unit is a unit, and not whatever someone is pretending it is today. You notice how the pace here is built to prevent haste. No one rushes the beam. The weighing hand waits until the pans stop trembling. Outside, ropes are checked before they fail. Here, measures are checked before they become lies. A shipment is brought forward, and the calm trade murmur you've been swimming in all day thickens into concentrated intent. A bundle is opened only enough to confirm its contents, then closed again. A seal is inspected, held near the light, turned slightly. That small lump of hardened wax or clay carries an entire ocean of meaning. Untouched, unbroken, unargued. A weight lands in the pan, one you've seen handled before, and yet the beam dips too far, as if pulled by a hidden hunger. The weighing hand stills. The weight is lifted, turned, examined with quiet scrutiny. No accusation rises. They simply verify, and there it is, a subtle chip on the underside, small enough that a tired eye might miss it, but significant enough to tilt fairness by the breadth of a fingernail. The correction is gentle and immediate. The questionable weight is set aside. A standardized weight replaces it. The beam settles cleanly into balance, and the air relaxes in that almost invisible way you feel when you find the cool side of the pillow. You realize how Tyre maintains calm. Standards are close, hands are trained, and the system expects human weakness and quietly blocks it. The scribes record the adjustment without drama. Ink darkens into a line. A line becomes a boundary the future cannot easily cross. The record doesn't just remember, it prevents arguments. You catch small traces of the day woven into this space. A scratch on a weight from being dropped once and then never dropped again. A faint purple stain on someone's thumb. Proof that the dye yard's work travels on skin as well as cloth. The purple doesn't dominate these tables, but it lingers like an expensive thought. It reminds you what these numbers protect. Fabric that will go to far shores, color that will sit on shoulders like authority. You glance toward the harbor mouth where sunlight flashes on water and ships rock lazily against their lines. You think of the Shell Mountains, how many small spirals it takes to make a single deep hue. You think of cloth breathing in air to become itself. And now you think of scales and ledgers, how much quiet measuring it takes to keep that cloth moving honestly from hand to hand. Tyre's power isn't loud. It is balanced. It is weighed, resealed, and written down. And as you watch the beam's center point settle perfectly still for a moment, you feel your own thoughts settle with it, easing toward that same calm center, where nothing needs to be proved loudly because everything has already been measured. The stillness of the scales stays with you as you drift back toward the open lanes of the docks, and it changes the way you look at everything. Where you once saw only movement, crates sliding, ropes tightening, bodies passing, you now see invisible arithmetic holding the whole scene together. Every jar has a weight that has been agreed upon. Every seal has a story that has been checked. Every bundle has a place in someone's ledger, waiting patiently for its turn to become distance. The harbor is fuller now. The light has climbed, and Tyre has shifted from early hush into steady daytime productivity without ever becoming frantic. Ships sit at the quay like calm animals being fed and watered before a journey. Their hulls are marked with salt streaks and sun-warmed stains, evidence that the sea leaves fingerprints on everything it touches. You walk a familiar lane, the safe one, the one you learned with your feet instead of your ears, and you let the port's sensory tapestry move around you. The smells come first, layering like blankets. Brine, tar, wetwood, resin, and, faintly, the stubborn sour trace from the dye yard clinging to your sleeve like it refuses to let you become too comfortable. It is not unpleasant now. It is simply part of the world, like the way you can stop noticing the sound of a fan once you accept it as constant. Cargo arrives from everywhere, and your mind begins to map the world by scent and texture. Cedar timber gives off a clean, sharp perfume that seems to slice through the heavier air. Glass glints in shaded crates. Tyre's own artistry, packed in straw and handled with the kind of caution you wish people used with your feelings at the end of a long week. Metal goods, tools, fittings, small ingots, carry a cooler smell, like stone after rain. Sacks of grain are dusty and warm, their tied mouths tight, their bodies stacked so air can move between them. You catch a drift of spices and dried herbs, and your attention narrows the way it does when you smell something unexpectedly familiar. It isn't familiar in the sense that you've used it in your kitchen. Your kitchen is probably surviving on sheer willpower right now, but familiar in the sense that your body recognizes its promise. Heat, sweetness, sharpness, a wakeful edge. The sacks are double-tied, labeled, and stacked with the same disciplined care you saw in the warehouses, because flavor is delicate and commerce is unforgiving. Oil arrives in amphory sealed with wax and rope. The jars are set down with controlled gentleness, never dropped, never slammed. You see hands check stoppers for dampness, a quick glance for seepage. You remember the scales and you understand why this careful handling matters. A single leak is not just a mess. It is an argument waiting to happen. Along another row, bales of cloth are moved like sleeping bodies, lifted with two people, supported at the center, never dragged across grit. Some cloth is pale and plain, destined for practical lives. Some is finer, smoother, already carrying patterns in the weave. And then, tucked among them like a secret that refuses to stay completely hidden, there is the purple, deep and restrained, folded under cover, emerging only in brief glances when a bundle shifts. You watch the purple in the corner of your vision and feel how it changes the entire scene without making a sound. It turns ordinary goods into supporting characters. It makes ropes and crates feel like part of a larger ritual. The careful movement of something people desire so intensely they pretend it was always meant for them. The dye yard's slow transformation, the shell mountain's stubborn scale, the scribe's quiet records, all of it funnels toward this simple fact: purple moves through Tyre like a low, steady heartbeat. The harbor itself seems designed for that kind of movement. Stone quays hold the waterline firmly. Posts stand at regular intervals, ready for lines. Wooden ramps bridge height differences so loads can slide rather than drop. Shaded areas wait for goods that can't tolerate sun. Open areas wait for goods that need air. The entire place feels like a body with circulation. Water brings, docks receive, warehouses hold, markets distribute, ships carry away. You let your gaze travel outward to the harbor mouth. Beyond the protection of Tyre's stone and skill, the sea opens into something wider, less predictable. It looks calm now, but you can sense the memory of storms in the way hulls are built, in the redundancy of ropes, in the caution of knots. The dock hands don't trust the sea to stay kind. They trust their own preparation. A ship's deck is briefly visible past a stack of crates, and you glimpse the tight order of travel. Coils stored cleanly, spare fittings ready, water jars secured, goods lashed down so the first hard wave won't undo days of work. That discipline mirrors the warehouse and the weighing table. Tyre's calm is not one thing. It is a habit repeated at every stage. As you keep walking, your senses keep collecting little fragments of the wider world. A crate stamped with a mark that suggests a distant city. A bundle wrapped in a style that doesn't match Tyre's usual habits. A scent. Smoke, citrus peel, unfamiliar wood, that hints at shores you've never touched. The port is a meeting point of climates and cultures, but it doesn't become chaotic because everything is translated into the same local language. Stack neatly, tie properly, seal carefully, record honestly. The trade murmur continues around you, never rising into sharp edges. It is practical sound, agreement, confirmation, a soft denial that doesn't need to bruise anyone's pride. And in that steady murmur, you feel your own internal noise fading. Your mind, which loves to spin stories at midnight, starts to prefer simple sequences. Carry, set down, weigh, mark, seal, store, load, depart. You pause again at the edge of the quay and look down at the water. Reflections wobble and settle. A hull nudges the stone with a quiet knock, like the harbor is reminding you it's still here, still breathing. And yes, you can feel it. The gentle danger of drowsiness creeping closer. Not the kind that makes you miss something important, but the kind that makes you finally stop fighting your own tiredness. Tyre's docks, with their calm commerce and their deep purple secret, keep offering you the same soothing lesson from every angle. Everything precious is moved slowly, carefully, and without panic. So you keep drifting forward, carried by the port's steady circulation, letting the world pour in around you as if it's nothing more than a quiet tide. The day eases toward evening without anyone announcing it. Tyre simply shifts its shoulders and lets the light slide lower. Heat drains from the stone quays. Shadows stretch along the lanes you learned to walk in, safe, orderly, quietly forgiving. The ropes that hummed all morning still hum, but now the note is softer, as if the harbor is clearing its throat for night. You drift toward the mole, the long arm of stone reaching into the water to blunt the sea's moods. It is practical, almost plain, yet it feels tender in the way it shelters the inner harbor and keeps the worst waves from slapping the docks too hard. Under your feet, the stones are warm at first, then quickly cooling, releasing the last stored sunlight as if the day is paying its final bill. Behind you, the port continues, but it thins into smaller motions. A final crate is nudged under cover. A jar is checked for seepage, then left alone. A bundle of cloth is tightened with twine and carried inland, and for a brief moment you catch the purple again. Deep as gathered dusk, folded in on itself as if it prefers privacy. Your mind flicks back to the Shell Mountains and their stubborn sea-sour smell, and to the dye yard steam where patience did the real work while everyone looked almost bored. because real craft doesn't need applause. Out here, the sounds soften into something your body can treat like a lullaby. Footsteps on planks become a muted rhythm, and the occasional clink of pottery lands gently in the air and dissolves. Even the gulls quiet down, as if they too have a schedule. The water inside the harbor smooths, reflecting the sky in slow, broken strokes. Oil lamps begin to appear, first one, then another, until a scattered constellation traces the harbor's edges. Each flame is steady, modest, reliable. You watch one being cupped from a stray breeze and set back upright, and you recognize the familiar Tyrian habit: prevent surprises. Night can bring trouble, so night is met with preparation, not panic. As the sky deepens, ships become darker shapes, their hulls turning into silhouettes. The water carries the lamp reflections in trembling trails, like thin ribbons of gold pulled across black glass. Beyond the mole, the sea looks wider and less intimate. It is calm now, but its calm has a different flavor. Less like a promise, more like a pause. You keep walking until the city feels both close and far. Close enough to sense steady labor continuing. Far enough that the harbor's noise becomes a single gentle breath. Here, evening has room to settle. The wind touches your face with cool salt, and you inhale more slowly, as if your lungs are learning from the waves. Small rituals happen around you, quiet as everything else. Hands touch stone briefly, not for show, but like a greeting to the structure that keeps the harbor safe. A lamp is placed on a ledge and left to burn. A few people pause with heads lowered, shoulders still, attention turned inward for a moment. When a life depends on wind and wood and honest measures, you learn to respect forces you cannot negotiate with. You offer a little gratitude. You ask, silently, for the knots to keep holding, for the lamps to keep burning, and for the next tide to arrive without a fight. The smells shift with the cooling air. Tar and rope soften. Resin still cuts through, clean and sharp. Somewhere inland, cooking smoke drifts out, warm, faint, comforting, reminding you that even the busiest port eventually feeds its people and lets them sleep. Your body responds before your mind does. Shoulders loosen, jaw unclenches. The world narrows into simple sensations. Cool stone under your soles, mild wind against your cheeks, lamplight wobbling in the water. Night watch begins the way everything begins here. Quietly, methodically. A steady presence moves along the quay, checking lamps, listening to lines, touching posts for vibration. You remember the dock hands reading rope tension with their fingertips as if it were a language, and you can almost imagine them reading the night the same way. Feeling for trouble before trouble finds a voice. The same calm logic that kept jars from cracking and scale beams from lying now keeps darkness from becoming careless. You stop and rest your palm on the mole stone. It is rough, weathered by salt and spray, and yet it holds. It holds ships. It holds cargo. It holds the city's calm. For a moment you picture the whole day as a chain of gentle safeguards. Ropes checked, seals inspected, cloth lowered and lifted, measures balanced until the beam found center. Even the purple, that deep secret of Tyre, is protected less by mystery than by routine. The air cools another degree. The lamps brighten by contrast. The harbor becomes a softer version of itself. Still alive, still organized, but wrapped in night's blanket. Your thoughts float outward with the reflections, then drift back into the safer, quieter water inside the mole. And you let it happen because the city is teaching you the simplest lesson it knows. When the work is honest and the rhythms are steady, you do not have to stay tense. You can ease. You can settle. You can let the night carry you as gently as the inner harbor carries its reflected light. The lamps along the quay keep trembling in the water, and you turn back from the mole toward the harbor's working lanes. Night does not shut Tyre down. It simply lowers the volume and tightens the discipline. Ropes hold ships close to stone, their quiet hum blending with the tide's slow insistence. You sense a shift before you can name it. The night watch, which had been moving in smooth, solitary loops, begins to gather toward one pocket of light. No one runs. No one raises a voice, but bodies angle in the same direction. Lanterns cluster, and the soft trade murmur thickens into concentrated attention. You follow at the pace the harbor allows. Your sleeve still carries a faint memory of the dye yard's salt, steam, and that sour edge you pretended not to mind. The shaded space near the scales is lit by a few oil lamps and one steady lantern. The beam of the scale stands still, its pans empty, like a face refusing to react until it has facts. A scribe's board lies open. A reed pen rests nearby. Everything looks orderly, yet the air is unmistakably tighter, as if the whole group is holding a single slow breath. You see why. A wooden chest sits on the weighing table, the kind built for cloth that must travel safely. Corners reinforced, lid fitted close, twine wrapped in careful lines. It should be sealed where the twine crosses, a small pressed lump of wax or clay declaring, untouched. But there is only a clean gap. The twine isn't cut. The knots appear intact. The lid doesn't look forced. And still the seal is missing. It is almost annoyingly subtle. If you were less trained by this place and more exhausted by your own life, you might overlook it entirely. But Tyre does not build its peace on probably fine. It builds it on checks, marks, and the small rituals that keep suspicion from multiplying. Hands hover above the chest without touching. The same restraint you used in the warehouse when you kept your fingers off folded cloth. A lamp is angled so light falls directly on the twine, the wood grain, the tiny smudge where wax used to sit. Eyes move in quiet sequence. Chest to ledger, ledger to the stack of standard seals, seals to the doorway where night air slips in. No clear words reach you, only murmurs, low and controlled. You understand enough anyway. A missing seal is not just a missing piece of wax. It is a missing sentence in a contract. It is the gap where a story could be rewritten. Your mind tries to make it exciting. Some shadowy hand, some clever swap, but Tyre refuses to indulge you. A scribe begins to write, recording what is seen rather than what is feared. The pen's scratch is soft and steady, and that steadiness keeps the moment from tipping into drama. The chest is not opened. Not yet. That restraint is the first protection. If you break the calm, you create a bigger problem than the one you have. A lantern bearer turns toward the warehouse lane, and several others follow. You drift with them, letting the city guide your feet as it has all day. The warehouse doors are darker now, but not abandoned. Inside, the air is cool, smelling of cedar and stored time. Lantern light glides over stacked amphory, tags tied with twine, neat piles of goods waiting like patient sleepers. The search is slow and practical. Hands scan the floor for fallen wax, crumbs, fragments, a pressed mark still intact. Light schemes along thresholds where a seal might have caught and snapped as a chest was carried in. Someone angles the lantern under a low slat. Someone lifts a mat, checks beneath, sets it back exactly as it was. Your tired brain wants a sudden reveal, but Tyre insists on the method that works. Look again, then look better. Outside, the sea continues its indifferent breathing. The lamps along the quay still tremble in the water, as if quietly mocking humans who worry over a lump of wax. And yet you understand why the worry is real. Purple cloth is not just cloth here. It is time, heat, brine, and thousands of shells condensed into a shade that can make powerful people feel chosen. If a seal goes missing on a chest tied to that trade, the entire harbor feels the sting. Not as panic, but as risk. A faint wind slips in, cool and damp. It nudges the lantern flame and makes the light shiver. For a moment, you feel the harbor's small vulnerability. Not weakness, Tyre is not weak, but the truth that even disciplined systems rely on tiny things. A knot, a weight, a seal, a mark. Lose one, and you don't lose the cargo immediately. You lose the certainty that keeps the cargo honest. The group returns toward the scales, lanterns moving like slow fireflies. The chest waits, still unopened, still quiet, and more accusing for how calm it looks. The missing seal has not been found yet, and the night has taken on a new texture. Calm darkness with a question in it. You stand at the edge of the light and let that question exist without feeding it. The harbor is doing what it always does. Holding steady, refusing panic, measuring the problem until it becomes solvable. And as the murmurs continue and the lamps burn on, you realize Tyre is teaching you one more lesson. How to meet uncertainty without turning it into noise. The missing seal sits in your mind like a pebble in a shoe. Small, irritating, impossible to ignore once you know it's there. The lamps around the scales keep burning, steady and unimpressed by human anxiety. But the night itself begins to change in a way that feels older and more physical than paperwork. You smell it first. Not the dye-yard sour tang. That familiar ghost still lives on your sleeve. But the sharp mineral scent of weather turning. The breeze grows cooler, then strangely warm for a breath, then cool again. It slides along the quay as if the sea has shifted in its sleep and knocked something loose. Over the harbor mouth, the sky thickens. The stars don't vanish dramatically. They simply fade behind a thin veil, like a curtain being drawn with practiced hands. The water inside the mole stays relatively calm, but beyond the stone arm you can see the outer sea darken into a heavier texture. Small ripples sharpen, reflections stretch and fracture. The wind changes direction twice in the span of a few breaths, which is the sea's way of saying, gently, that it has opinions tonight. Tyre responds the way it always responds. Not with shouting, but with motion that becomes slightly quicker, slightly more purposeful while remaining controlled. A lantern is lifted higher to guard its flame. A coil of rope is checked and tightened. A ship's line is adjusted so the hull won't grind against stone if the tide rises with a surge. The harbor is preparing, not panicking, and the distinction is almost soothing. You feel the night watch's attention split. The missing seal still matters. Trust is the backbone of this place, but weather is the hand that can slap everyone at once. A harbor can survive a suspicious chest. A dye yard cannot shrug off damp air and sudden rain the way a warehouse can. And that's when you notice the subtle migration of bodies and lantern light away from the scales and toward the inland lanes. Not abandoning the problem, Tyre does not abandon problems, but widening the circle of what must be protected tonight. You follow the flow, careful to stay in the safe lanes even in dim light. The stones are cooler now under your soles. The wind runs along the passages between buildings, gathering speed the way a thought gathers momentum when you should be sleeping. It's almost comical, the timing of it. Of course the sky chooses tonight to get dramatic the same night a seal goes missing. Life loves stacking tasks like that, as if it's trying to see what breaks first. The dye yard appears ahead as a darker pocket of space framed by low walls. In lamplight, the vats look like black mirrors, and the racks of cloth sway slightly, more than they should. The steam that was rising in slow, lazy curls earlier is now being pushed sideways, flattened by the wind into thin sheets that slide away and vanish. This is not the kind of weather you can ignore and deal with later. Purple is stubborn, yes, but it is also picky. It asks for timing. It asks for air. It asks for the right balance of warmth and brine and exposure. Too much damp and the cloth won't breathe the way it needs to. Too much wind and the hanging fabric can twist, slap, fold on itself, and dry unevenly. And if rain arrives, actual rain, not a polite drizzle, the vats can be cooled too fast, diluted or contaminated, turning a careful batch into a disappointing bruise of color instead of that deep, gathered dusk people crave. You watch the workers move, and you see how the craft turns into quiet triage. Covers appear, heavy cloth, wooden lids, woven screens, set over vats to keep ash, grit, and water out. Racks are steadied so fabric doesn't whip and fold. The movement stays measured. Lift, place, secure, check, tighten, check again. Hands work quickly, but nothing is thrown. Even urgency here wears soft shoes. A lamp guttering in the gust is cupped and shielded. Another is moved to a safer corner. The light becomes steadier again, and you feel your own pulse settle with it. The strange, how comforting competence can be. The storm can have its drama. Tyre answers with routine. The air grows denser. You catch the first faint touch of moisture on your skin. Barely there, more suggestion than impact, like the sky is clearing its throat. Somewhere beyond the walls, you hear a deeper exhale from the sea, a low rush that isn't quite a wave and isn't quite wind. The sound wraps around the yard and makes the hanging cloth tremble. You find yourself thinking of the Shell Mountains, those pale spirals piled high, the raw starting point that smells like sea truth. You think of the stirring paddles tracing circles in dark brine. You think of the moment cloth emerges from the vat looking unimpressive, then changes as it meets air. That transformation is delicate in its own stubborn way. It doesn't like to be bullied by weather. More covers go on. The open surfaces shrink. The yard's breathing becomes contained. Where the wind tries to reach in, screens are angled to block it. Where damp tries to cling, heat is preserved as best as it can be. You can almost feel the calculations happening without being spoken. Which vat is at risk, which cloth can be moved, which pieces need air, which pieces need protection, how long until the sky commits. At the edge of the yard, you glimpse a bundle wrapped carefully. Purple cloth mid-process or newly finished, handled with extra restraint, kept away from any path where a sudden gust could flip a corner into dust or rain. The purple looks almost black in the dim, then catches a lamp glow and reveals itself. Deep, saturated, calm even when the weather isn't. It's the kind of color that seems to carry its own night inside it. A private dusk that refuses to be rushed. Behind you, the missing seal remains unresolved. A question waiting near the scales like a stone in still water. But here in the dye yard, the threat is immediate and physical. Weather doesn't negotiate. Weather doesn't care about ledgers. Weather simply arrives, and everything you've watched all day, patience, routine, verification, has to meet it in real time. A stronger gust presses through, and the lamps flicker. Your eyelids feel heavy, not from boredom, but from the way the whole scene moves with slow, controlled determination. You can almost hear the harbor's lesson repeating itself in the wind. No panic, just preparation. The first real drops begin to fall, soft, sparse taps that darken stone in tiny circles, while the dye yard stands quietly armored under covers and screens, holding its breath and its brine, guarding its purple against the sky's sudden mood. The rain doesn't arrive with thunder and theatrics. It arrives the way tired thoughts arrive at 2 a.m., one drop, then another, then a quiet insistence that you will have to deal with it, whether you feel like it or not. The stone darkens in scattered freckles. The wind tests the edges of every cover as if it's trying to peek inside and see what you're protecting. Tyre answers with the same steady competence you've watched all day, only now the motions tighten into calm urgency. No running, no flailing, no pointing at the sky as if the sky has a manager. Instead, hands go to what matters first. The vats, the racks, the seams where water might creep in. You stay in the safe lane, letting lantern light guide your steps. A low wooden lid is set over a vat and weighted with smooth stones. Those same familiar stones that kept measures honest at the scales, now pressed into service as rain shields. A woven screen is angled against the wind, creating a pocket of quieter air where cloth can hang without snapping and folding over itself. The screen shudders, and twine tightens around its frame until it holds. You notice the tools that appear now, because this is the moment when small, solid objects become heroes without asking for credit. Copper bowls and small copper scoops catch water where it pools, lifting it away before it can drip into a vat or soak folded cloth. Copper hooks pull a corner of canvas tighter around a post. Copper nails, already kept ready because Tyre plans for everything, pin a loosened edge back into place with quick, controlled taps that sound like soft knuckles on wood. Rain slicks the stone underfoot, and you feel your body want to tense. But the dye yard has been designed for this. Channels guide runoff away. Raised slats keep cloth off the ground. Covered beams wait for pieces that need air but not wetness. You watch the workers move like people who have been interrupted before and have learned not to take it personally. A rack sways too hard in a gust, and for a breath you imagine the fabric twisting, trapping dampness, drying unevenly, turning careful color into expensive disappointment. The workers don't hope it'll be fine. They shift the rack to a more sheltered angle, add a second line of support, and tie it low and then higher so it can't twist. The knots are neat and practiced, the same quiet sculpture you saw on the quay, just repurposed for weather. Near one covered vat, a thin seep of rainwater finds an opening and begins to bead along the lid's edge. It's small. Still, a copper scoop appears, and a thin line of concentrated brine is poured along the seam, letting salt water run into the gap and discourage whatever would try to sour there. The brine isn't just liquid here. It's a protective habit. Salt preserves. The sea's own harshness becomes a shield. The air smells sharper now. Wet stone, damp rope, smoke from a small fire kept alive under shelter. You catch the fire's warmth as you pass, and it feels like a hand on your shoulder. Heat matters tonight. Rain tries to steal it, so the fire stays modest, steady, and fed, not to fight the storm like a warrior, but to outlast it like a patient friend. Cloth is moved with care, one piece at a time, from exposed racks to covered beams where air can still circulate. Nothing is stacked in panic. Each piece is hung so it can breathe. The yard refuses to trade tonight's protection for tomorrow's mold. Even under rain, Tyre keeps thinking in sequences. Protect, but don't suffocate. A loose corner of covering flaps and slaps against a post, sounding loud only because everything else is controlled. A copper hook catches the edge and holds it steady while twine ties it down. The covering stops snapping. The whole yard seems to exhale. The work becomes a quiet loop. Check lids. Check lashings. Check runoff. Empty pooled water. Adjust screens. Keep the small fire breathing. The repetition is hypnotic, like the stirring you watched earlier. Circles traced not for speed, but for steadiness. Lantern flames wobble, then settle, then wobble again, and each time a hand shields them, patient and practiced. It occurs to you, in that gentle, half-sarcastic way your sleep-deprived brain likes to deliver truth, that Tyre's calm is not a personality trait. It's infrastructure. its tools stored where they'll be needed, its routines taught so deeply that weather can't knock them loose, its copper and twine and brine, and the willingness to do small repairs before they become disasters. A cool gust slips through and the steam from one vat thins. Heat threatened. The windbreak is tightened. The sheltered fire is fed. Steam returns in slow curls, resuming its lazy drift as if nothing happened. The vats keep their warmth. The cloth keeps its chance. You stand in damp air, listening to rain tap softly on coverings, to copper tools clink, to rope fibers tighten with each careful pull. The missing seal near the scales remains a question hanging elsewhere in the harbor's night. But here the immediate problem is being met in the only way Tyre knows. Not with noise, but with method. And as the rain continues to fall in patient drops, the dye yard stays patient too. Steady hands, salt water, copper tools, and quiet repairs holding the purple work safe until the sky decides it has teased you enough. The rain keeps tapping for a while, then thins into something lighter, as if the sky gets bored of its own mood. The dye yard stays covered and steady, the small fire still breathing, and Tyre's attention returns to the quieter kind of danger. The kind that slips in through a missing mark. You follow the lantern's back toward the scales. The sheltered pocket is brighter now, lamps gathered close, their flames cupped from the wind. The weighing table sits level and clean. Standard weights wait in their neat family cluster. The scribe's board rests ready. And in the center of it all, the chest remains calm and accusing in its silence. Twine wrapped, knots intact, but no seal where a seal should be. No one treats it like panic. They treat it like an audit. First, they look at what cannot lie. Fingers hover over the knots and red tension the way dock hands red rope. The twine holds a certain stubborn tightness when it has never been disturbed. A lantern is angled to catch dust lines along the lid. Fine powder settled into the grain that would smear if the wood had been shifted. The lid's edges look honest. The knots look old, not freshly retied. The chest gives no sign of being opened, only of being incomplete. Then the process widens, slow and thorough. The ledger is opened and kept close to the light. The scribe's marks are checked against the chest's tag. The tag is checked against the stack it came from. The stack is checked against the day's tally. It is soothing in a way only competence can be. A calm chain of confirmations, each link tested before anyone trusts the next. Standard seals are counted and compared with practiced care. A set of impressions, kept like fingerprints, rests nearby, ready for matching. The entry for this chest is traced with a fingertip. Weighed, recorded, sealed. The story says the seal existed. So the question becomes simple and stubborn. If the seal was applied and then broke, where are the crumbs of wax? Lantern light sweeps the floor in slow passes, eyes trained to spot the unnatural shine of a fragment among dull grit. Nothing. The stone is wet in patches from the earlier rain, but there are no telltale flakes. No one sighs. No one invents a villain. They simply move to the next possibility. If the seal was never applied, the ledger should show hesitation, correction, a blank space. Doesn't. The pen stroke is steady. The entry is confident. Tyre's records, like its knots, do not usually pretend. So where does a seal go when it is not on the chest and not on the ground? It goes where hands place it for just a moment, while the world demands attention elsewhere. A lamp is moved closer to the scribe's board. The board's surface shows faint smudges, fingerprints, a slight sheen where wax has been near heat. The board is lifted and turned over carefully, as if even wood deserves respect when it's been part of the chain of trust. There, clinging to the underside, is the missing seal. It sits flattened slightly, pressed by accident when the board was shifted during the rain preparations. The impression is still clean, edges sharp, mark intact, protected by the very mistake that hid it. The seal didn't disappear into theft or trickery. It disappeared into tired hands doing many careful tasks at once while wind and damp tried to make everything harder. The harbor doesn't celebrate, simply adjusts. A warm stone is held near a lamp to coax softness into the wax without melting it into surrender. A thin tool eases the seal free. The scribe makes a precise amendment in the ledger. Seal found intact. Impression matches the expected mark. The record remains continuous, which is what Tyre values more than drama. Only then do they finish what should have been finished earlier. The twine crossing on the chest is positioned under steady light. The seal is pressed into place with controlled pressure, firm enough to bond, gentle enough not to smear the impression. A finger lingers for a heartbeat to ensure it holds. Another hand shields it from the breeze until it cools and hardens back into its proper role. A small, silent guardian. The air around you loosens. Not because the world is suddenly safe, Tyre knows better, but because one more system has held. Tonight, maintenance wins. The weights return to their nested order. The scribe's board is placed back, now right side up and slightly more respected. The chest is moved to a sheltered stack, ready for the next tide and the next careful set of hands. Outside, the rain fades into a whisper. Inside the lamplight, the harbor returns to its steady breathing, and you feel it in your own body, too. That quiet satisfaction when the missing piece is found, not by force, but by calm, methodical attention that refuses to make noise just to feel important. With the seal restored, the harbor's tension dissolves into ordinary night work, not laziness. Tyre never gets sloppy, but the smoother, kinder rhythm that returns when a question has been answered and the world can go back to being predictable. You drift away from the scales with the faint warmth of that resolution in your chest. The seal was never stolen. It was misplaced, pressed into the underside of a board during rain preparations, hidden by the very competence that kept everything else safe. It feels almost like a lesson delivered with gentle sarcasm. The universe didn't need a villain tonight, just a reminder that even careful people can misplace a tiny thing when weather and fatigue stack up. Now, with the missing mark returned to its rightful place, your attention stretches outward again, following purple the way your eyes follow lamplight across water. The harbor at night is quieter, but it doesn't stop being a crossroads. Goods still move in small, disciplined patterns. A few late arrivals are guided toward shelter. A ship is checked for tight lines. A lantern is trimmed so its flame stays steady. The whole port looks like it's settling into sleep while keeping one eye half open. Because the sea never truly sleeps, and neither do the people who depend on it. You begin tracing the purple's journey, not with maps or speeches, but with the way your mind naturally drifts when it's calm. You've seen the starting point. Shell mountains piled high, the sour truth of sea life turned into raw material. You've watched the dye yard. Vats of brine warmed and managed like living things, cloth dipped and lifted and hung, color shifting in air as if waking up. You've watched the warehouse. Cool stone and cedar beams preserving goods against moisture and time. You've watched the scales. Weights and ledgers guarding trust like a quiet fortress. Now you imagine what happens after the harbor accepts the chest as whole. The sealed chest is moved onto a ship with the kind of restraint reserved for fragile glass or sacred objects. It is placed where it will not slide. It is lashed down with clean rope, knots tightened and checked. It becomes part of the vessel's body, a weight and a responsibility. The purple inside it is folded and protected, and you can almost feel the fabric holding its color in silence, like night held inside cloth. Then the ship departs, not with a dramatic farewell, but with a gradual loosening. Lines are paid out. Oars or poles nudge the hull away from stone. The vessel finds the deeper water beyond the mole's protection and begins to ride the larger breath of the sea. The lamps of Tyre recede behind it, and the city becomes a low line of light and shadow. Purple travels this way, quietly, steadily, under watchful hands. In your mind, routes unspool like threads. The coast, familiar and close, dotted with other ports that speak the same language of rope and seal. Islands where water changes color and wind behaves differently. Distant harbors where new smells wait. Different woods, different spices, different fish, different stone. Trade is the world's slow conversation, carried not by shouting, but by repeated visits, shared measures, and the quiet confidence that something promised will be delivered. You realize how much of Tyre's power comes from not trying to own everything. The city doesn't conquer by sword in this moment of your drift. It conquers by reliability. It becomes the place people trust to supply what they cannot easily make. It becomes the name linked to a color so rare that wearing it signals not just wealth but connection, to Tyre, to the sea, to the invisible network of hands and records and knots. Purple becomes a kind of portable authority. It sits on shoulders and drapes across thrones. It lines ceremonial garments. It marks status the way a seal marks a chest. Untouched, verified, valuable. And yet, for all that imagined grandeur, your mind keeps returning to the smallness of the origin. A shell, a drop, a vat, a hand stained under a nail, a scribe's pen, a wax seal pressed into place and allowed to harden. It's almost funny, gentle, sleepy humor, how the world builds its symbols from such ordinary materials. People at far courts will admire the purple and pretend it arrived by fate. They will call it royal, divine, destined. They won't smell the shell piles. They won't stand in steam by brine vats. They won't watch someone patiently shield a lamp flame from wind so a seal can cool without smearing. They will see only the finished cloth and the story they prefer. But you have seen the quieter story, and it feels more comforting than the grand one. Because the quieter story means the world is held together by practical people doing repetitive tasks well. It means beauty can be manufactured by patience. It means value is less about magic and more about method. As the harbor continues its night rhythm, you let your imagination widen a little more. You picture the purple leaving Tyre in chests and bundles, moving along coasts and across open sea, traded for timber, metal, grain, glass, spices. Each exchange recorded, weighed, resealed. You picture the color surviving sun and salt because it clings, stubbornly, to fiber the way it clings to skin. You picture it becoming legend. And then you bring your attention back to where you are, because Tyre is still here, still breathing, still a city of lamps and stone and disciplined calm. The sea outside still moves, weather still shifts, but tonight the system's held. The seal is where it belongs. The purple is protected. The harbor hums low and steady, and your body, learning from it, hums a little lower too. You wake to softer light, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. The storm's mood has passed, and the harbor carries the rinsed clarity that follows rain. Stone darker at the seams, air cleaner, smells sharpened into layers instead of one blurred breath. Lamps have been pinched out as dawn takes over the job of seeing. You return to the market lanes that feed the docks, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned where to put their feet. Your body remembers the rules without needing a lecture. Don't block a carrier's line. Don't brush stacked jars. Don't touch a seal unless you're ready to inherit its consequence. The market is not one square. It spills around the harbor in practical clusters. Awnings propped on poles, low tables, baskets on mats, cloth lines strung between posts to catch morning air. Goods are arranged with the same calm logic you saw in the warehouses. Lifted from damp ground, shaded from harsh sun, tied, covered, nested, balanced. No one is acting like the world nearly ended last night. Tyre doesn't do theatrical. Tyre does prepared. You pass baskets of salted fish and dried things, the sea preserved into food the way purple is preserved into cloth. The smell is strong but honest, and it wakes you without jolting. Nearby, amphorae of oil catch the new light. Glossy surfaces, stoppers sealed. Necks wrapped in twine that looks as tidy as a promise. Hands lift and set down with controlled gentleness, and the sight pulls you back to the scale beam finding balance, the way it quieted the air when it reached its center. Spices sit in small mounds and tightly tied sacks, their scents sharp, warm, and clean. Knots are checked. Labels sit where they can be read without opening. Everywhere you look, the same habit repeats. Reduce surprises, then reduce them again. Cloth hangs in gentle folds. You can tell without touching what is rough and what is fine. The course we've meant for sails looks ready to fight wind. The smoother cloth meant for garments looks ready to drape and hold shape. Somewhere among pale and patterned pieces, you glimpse purple again, and your attention slows on instinct. In daylight it is more complex than it was by lamplight. Dark at the core, edged with richness, almost alive where it catches sun. It doesn't need to announce itself. The harbor treats it like a heartbeat, present without being displayed. A passing hand bears a faint stain, and your mind flicks back to the Shell Mountains and to the dye yard's sour warmth. The brine, the steam, the slow circles traced with paddles. You remember how cloth looked unimpressive when it first rose from the vat, then deepened as it met air, as if color could be persuaded by patience. The purple here, folded and guarded, carries that whole sequence inside it. The market's banter stays low, more rhythm than argument. You don't catch words so much as cadence, confirmation, reconsideration, agreement. The sound is a gentle pulse, and it makes your eyelids heavy in the way that feels like a promise. Small kindnesses find you the way sunlight finds the edge of a folded cloth. Water appears cool, plain, and exactly what your body wanted before your mind even thought to ask. A piece of fruit rests in your hands, bright and clean in the morning air. A rough piece of bread, still warm, settles in your palm with the quiet certainty that you're allowed to be nourished. No speeches, no bargaining, just practical hospitality, given the way Tyre gives everything, without noise. You carry these small gifts toward the shoreline beyond the densest stalls. The harbor opens again, bright, reflecting pale sky in slow ripples. Boats sit at rest, their lines quiet, their hulls steady against stone. The mole stands where it always stood, blunt and faithful, absorbing the sea's moods so the inner harbor can remain a place of work rather than worry. You pause and look back at the city. Stone, timber, awnings, thin smoke rising in lines that vanish into brighter air. You think of the seal that went missing and then quietly reappeared where tired hands had pressed it by accident, and you feel a private affection for the way Tyre solves problems. By checking, not accusing. And this is when you understand what you cannot pack. You could leave with an object, something glassy, something stamped, something carved. Tyre offers objects the way the sea offers shells. Endlessly. But the true souvenirs have already settled into you, and they refuse to become merchandise. The feel of rope vibration under your palm. The cool hush of a warehouse aisle. The sour heat of the dye yard and the way purple deepens as it meets air. The whetstone scent after rain. The relief of watching a system hold steady without needing a hero. Even the purple, so famous, so desired, feels less like a thing to own now and more like a reminder. It reminds you that value is often an agreement built out of patience and labor. It reminds you that celebrated symbols rest on tasks that look boring from the outside. And it reminds you gently that your own life is also made of small acts, done quietly, repeated faithfully, rarely applauded, and still real. You keep walking along the market's edge as the morning brightens. You let the fruit's sweetness fade on your tongue. Let the warm bread sit in your hand like a steady weight. You watch the harbor continue. Goods shifting, ropes checked, seals pressed, records made, without needing you at the center of any of it, while somewhere beneath your ribs a calmer rhythm begins to feel like it belongs to you. You return to the docks as the day leans toward afternoon, and everything feels familiar now. The lanes worn into the planks, the posts darkened by hands and salt, the harbor air layered with tar, cedar, brine, and that faint sour reminder of the dye yard that still clings to your sleeve like a stubborn footnote. Tyre does not look like it is preparing a farewell. It simply keeps doing what it does. Holding the sea at arm's length, moving goods with steady hands, and letting the world pass through without fuss. A sealed chest is carried past you. Carefully, evenly, twine crossed and wax set exactly where it should be. Your mind flicks back to last night's missing seal and the quiet relief when it was found. Not by accusation but by attention. The lesson sits in you now, settled and warm. Most problems do not require panic, only a slower gaze and the courage to check again. You walk along the quay and let the harbor show you its ordinary miracles one last time. Lines are tested with fingertips tightened a fraction, checked again. Amphorae are shifted into shades so heat cannot bully them. Glass is handled like light made solid. A scribe's board catches a brief glint as a record is made. Simple marks anchoring a complicated journey. No one performs. Everyone contributes. The entire port feels like a breathing machine built out of small habits. Near the edge, you pause beside a bundle of cloth waiting under cover. The weave is fine, the folds neat, the handling respectful. As a carrier adjusts the bundle, a corner slips free for a heartbeat and you see the purple. Deep as gathered dusk, richer in daylight than it was by lamplight, a color that looks like evening taught to stay. You do not reach for it because you have learned restraint here, but the fabric brushes close as it is lifted, and your thumb meets it by accident. Just the lightest contact, less a grasp than a passing touch. When the bundle is settled again, you look down and see a faint stain on your skin. Not bright, not showy, but unmistakable. A tiny purple thumbprint. It is absurdly small compared to the shell mountains and the brine vats and the careful ledgers, and yet it feels like the most honest souvenir you could take. It is proof that you were near the work, near the patience, near the quiet engine that turns sea life into legend. You rub your thumb lightly and the color refuses to leave. Of course it does. That is the whole point. Tyre's purple is made to cling to fiber, to skin, to memory, to status. And while you stand there, feeling the breeze cool your knuckles, you realize that you've been collecting stains all along. The rope's vibration in your bones, the warehouse's cool hush behind your eyes, the taste of rain in the air, the comfort of copper tools clinking as small repairs saved a fragile process. The harbor mouth glitters beyond the mole. Water inside the protected curve remains calm, while the outer sea keeps its wider, indifferent breathing. Ships rock gently against their lines, readying themselves for departure with the same unromantic discipline you saw at dawn. Coils stored cleanly, lashings checked, pathways cleared. The sea is not trusted to be kind. Preparation is trusted to be sufficient. You keep walking until the city begins to feel like it is behind you and beside you at the same time. Stone walls hold their pale confidence. Awnings ripple slightly. The market scents, oil, spice, dried herbs, rise and fade as you pass. Somewhere, the dye yard continues its patient work under sun and air. The vats covered and uncovered in a rhythm that does not need your attention to remain true. At the edge of the quay, you stop and place your palm on a post warmed by daylight. The wood is rough and familiar. You feel a line's quiet tension running through it, a low hum that reminds you the harbor is still holding what it must hold. You let your breath lengthen to match that hum, and in that slow exhale you offer your own private farewell. Not with speeches, not with vows, just with a calm acknowledgement that you were allowed to witness a world that runs on method rather than noise. When you finally turn away, the docks do not chase you. They simply continue. A chest is resealed. A knot is tightened. A measure is checked until the beam finds center. Purple cloth is folded back into shade, guarded by routine instead of drama. The sea keeps tapping the stone in soft, repetitive knocks, the same gentle insistence you can now recognize as comfort. You walk along the shoreline path, the harbor shrinking into a pattern of posts and masts and pale stone. The lamps that will burn tonight are not yet lit, but you can already imagine their steady flames and the way they will tremble in the water like thin ribbons of gold. Your purple thumbprint remains, small and stubborn, and you let it be there. An almost invisible reminder that patience can be made tangible, that calm can be built, that even a tired mind can learn a slower clock. As Tyre fades behind you, the sound of the inner harbor softens into a single, gentle breath, and you carry that breath with you, letting it settle deeper and deeper, until the sea and the city and the color all become one quiet rhythm, guiding you towards sleep. You slow even more now, as if your feet are padded and the air has turned thick. The harbor is distant enough that you can no longer separate rope from water, market from quay, lamp from star. It all blends into one soft hush, and your shoulders drop, softly, steadily, without hurry. You keep your thumb close to your palm, and that faint purple stain feels warmer than it should. Not because it has heat, but because it has meaning, and meaning can be cozy when you're tired. You don't need to scrub it away. You don't need to prove anything. You let it fade in its own time, the way evening fades into night without anyone arguing. Your breathing becomes slower, deeper, steadier, in and out, like the inner harbor's sheltered water. You picture the dye yard again, covered from rain, protected by screens, warmed by a small, stubborn fire, the vats waiting patiently while the sky finished its tantrum. You picture the scale beam settling into balance. You picture the wax seal cooling, hardening, doing its quiet job. And then you let those images soften at the edges. The stone turns gentle. The water turns darker and smoother. The purple turns less like a color and more like a feeling, safe, heavy, gathered. If your thoughts try to wander back to tomorrow, you don't chase them. You just watch them drift, like lamp reflections trembling in the harbor and then dissolving when the water calms. Tyre continues without you. The world does not require your vigilance every second. Tonight, it only asks you to rest. You let the last light dim behind your eyelids. The sea's breath becomes your breath. The harbor's rhythm becomes your rhythm. And very quietly, with no effort at all, you allow sleep to arrive. End of story. Sweet dreams.